Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Talking Point, this Thursday edition on a comfortable, cool, not necessarily beautiful morning. And this morning, while we await, hopefully we'll be joined by my co-host in short order. I am joined once again by two special guests, no strangers to the program, of course. Hopefully, like my co-hosts, they are here to bring a little hope to our lives. I am speaking, of course, with Mr. Timothy Hammersmith and Mr. Steve Alvarez. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here.
So thank you once again for coming on to Talking Point. I know that we've planned to speak about some different aspects of I guess you could say need. I would say need in the national sphere. But of course, just in general now, we're a few weeks removed from your last appearance. So before we get into talks about infrastructure and so forth, I do want to just ask, in general, have you all seen a difference in the mood from citizens, from your friends, from your circles, from people you might just run into on the streets with regards to the direction we're heading in? Because I do find myself feeling as though, well, we can't really get any good news for the last several days, from any side almost, from any quarter.
Well, let me start by saying, if you look at what's happening now, we're in the rainy season. Almost every day as it rains, there's flood. I actually had to spend about 2 hours to get from Digicel to West Mall because of flooding in Cocorite. But that's just one of the annoying things that not only me, but people throughout Trinidad and Tobago have to deal with. But you're also dealing with the fact that you feel very, very uncertain every time you leave your home. Because the criminal gangs are now so empowered that they're driving. Remember, these are people in cars that are driving with high-powered rifles and shooting people at random and driving away. And that, to me, is one of the most unacceptable things about our country. Because you have a small country with minimum roads, and you have a police service of over 1,000 people, and you have hundreds of cars.
More than like several thousand people.
Right? And you have all these hundreds of police cars.
Yes.
And you were telling me that bandits are just driving away with high-powered rifles and nobody. So this feeling, and there's a feeling, I mean, people don't want to accept it, but it's a feeling among the population that the police don't care. And when you live in a country where you think that the police don't care, and the police don't care because, I mean, the basic things, I can understand that. Because some of the most basic things, like who is your boss? Who is running the police service is something that you haven't been able to do as a government. You can't appoint a commissioner of police.
It's been over a year.
So those kind of things leads to a semblance of anarchy, a semblance of disorder in the society, and yes, it doesn't do very much for economic confidence and so on. So it's really not a good place to be in at this time.
Mr. Hammersmith?
Certainly, there's a sense of disarray right through I think, the country. You go back to just before the election in 2020, you remember when there were marches coming into Port of Spain and that was turned back. That is a sense that you get in, that people are doing it because of bad roads, infrastructure crumbling, landslides, and they've reached, it would appear that they've reached the end of their tether, and they've said, hey, nobody's taking us on. The only thing that we have left to do is to protest, to block roads, to burn tires. And then you go to the criminal aspect of shooting and so on. And that has taken, I think, 17 people in a weekend, or those sort of numbers are beyond imagination. And there is a sense of, nobody's in charge. I think that's, Steve puts it, his finger on the pulse when he says, if you are a gang member, imagine, and you think there's nobody in charge, then I could do, with impunity, I could do what I like. There's a free-for-all going on. That's the sense the public have. And there are things besides leadership. Time and again, you hear the police say, well, we can't be everywhere, which is true. But you know what can be everywhere? Video cameras. But we don't have them working. I don't know what percentage of them, if any, are actually operating. And those should be operating in particular hotspot areas so that the police can respond as soon as these things happen. And are we putting IDs on car number plates, which we've been promised, what, 12 years ago or something? I mean,
that's my pet peeve.
Because you can then track people. Are we putting the same ID question on all the legitimate guns? Because you're hearing that the police are renting out their guns and renting out their uniforms. So where you say, you know, the police aren't doing their job, it's worse than that if they are part of the problem in the sense that they participate and benefit from ill-gotten gains because they feel that aligning themselves with gangs is a good business.
I mean, it's interesting.
So you're in a bad place.
It's interesting that has to happen because I do feel sometimes some of the public sector, like I understand that teachers are one of the groups that are fighting for higher wages, and there are private teachers who earn less wages. So I do wonder if there's a bit of a disconnect there. You know, to what extent now is it that the police just are greedy, or are they legitimately undercompensated for situations like that? But I mean, there's a couple of things that were said there that I would like you all to consider. Obviously, digital development just overall is one of the issues that I think is ongoing. Education, probably even healthcare, just our general bureaucracy completely. Video cameras and hotspots, but also choke points. It goes back to what you said, Mr. Alvarez. We already have choke points where if you want to get from this side of the country to that side of the country, you have to drive through here. Yeah. So we're not even talking about an array of cameras. One camera could monitor a choke point. But I think one of the biggest things that I want to ask you all about all other points here, you mentioned protests, and we have problems, and I think you all there are people who have issues and they feel like they're not being met. But I do wonder now, this is not just the government not meeting the needs, but also all the other channels now that are supposed to provide a voice for dissent, for disagreement, to raise issues, because we don't really see, not just the opposition, although I've criticized the opposition party multiple occasions, but any and all channels. It's almost as though we can't get any sort of organized consensus, so everybody grumbles in a rum shop, but the government doesn't hit the administration in any meaningful way, so they're just like, it's not a big deal.
One of the things that motivates people is wealth. There's a lot of wealth going through Trinidad and Tobago right now, a lot of money. But the money that's going through Trinidad and Tobago is illegal money. So we had a meeting not too long ago where someone asked the question, why should a young person not turn to crime when the crime pays so well? And I was saying that you have to make crime unattractive.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is that you create opportunities that are wealthy, that are economically viable for youth. And the government has to invest. These are straightforward, easy answers, you know. Instead of investing over $5 billion in national security to again, just buy, and it's so silly, you buy over 100 cars. And right now, there are over 200 police cars parked up, doing nothing. So first of all, you buy the cars, but you don't maintain them. So you have a situation where you keep spending money, throwing money at something. Whereas if you took not even $1 billion, you could take $500 million and invest that in your young people, invest it in your panyards, invest it in where people get in sports. So that, and a very, very lucrative area that I personally is aware of because I was involved in it, was in the Pro League. And in the Pro League, these guys were working for the average of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, and you'd be amazed how many young people were at all these various teams in the Pro League. But the Pro League was sponsored and financed by private sector. If the government invests money in football, if the government invests money in in netball. And
not ongoing, just to get it off the ground.
But once you do that, you are creating avenues of attraction that's an alternate to a criminal activity. And you have to do that. It's your responsibility to your country. You have to find a way. You cannot have our young people driving up and down the road with AR-15s and shooting at will. And that's the responsibility of the government.
Yeah.
The problem, I think, is that the government's response to that type of poverty, is that let's give them handouts.
Yes.
And what you do is worsen the problem. You don't improve it. You know, it's amazing. I think Trinidad has innovative people. It has people capable of invention, as it were. But do we stimulate that? That's where you should be putting your money.
Yeah.
Because when you have that creative mentality, which fundamentally we have in Trinidad and Tobago in spades, if you stimulate that, then in fact, so that's where you need to be putting your resources, so that you create a sandbox where people can develop technology. I mean, when you can get your foot into an area that is $1 trillion industry worldwide into technology. And I do think that it is perhaps the most disadvantaged communities who have the best option of developing in that area if they were exposed to, you know, computer programming, software programming. It's engineering. It's a real opportunity. I recall one of the things that I think very revealing. I'd spoken when President Robinson had died. I was then in the Parliament, and we had the condolence book there, and his daughter and son had come there, and you know, I was speaking with her. She told me she was a teacher in one of the depressed areas. And one of the things they did is they decided to bring in somebody to teach computer programming, software programming. And the amazing thing about it is those students who were basically dropouts, as it were, they may be physically there, but they just didn't participate. They had no desire to learn anything. All of a sudden, they are the ones who did best on the software programming. That is a natural, native inventiveness. Sometimes our education system educates out the inventiveness, you know, because we're so focused on books and learning and exams and so on. But the natural inventiveness is lost. So there is talent out there that can be tapped. And we allow it to go into gangs.
Because
without the intervention we need to
there's
make.
been, especially in this administration over the last, say, 3 or 4 years, a lack of vision. When we talked about the e-tech park and so on, that was part of a vision, I think, under the Patrick Manning administration. Under the Patrick Manning administration, you had the technology, and then you also had the scenario under the Patrick Manning administration of music, and they were teaching music and UTT and a whole lot of different things. As a nation, there must be a direction. Right now, there's absolutely no direction. Nobody knows what's the plan. All you know is that we're getting a little more money again from oil and gas, and you're getting a little more money from oil and gas. But what are you doing? There's no major infrastructure plan. There's no sense of this is where we're going as a country. As a matter of fact, that is the only thing we're thinking about as going as a country is down the hill. Down the road, it's really, really bad, and that's an absence of vision. Now, one of the things that we talk about, Tim and I have been talking about these things a lot, is that to inspire hope in the nation, you have to now say to them, this is the blueprint, and this is the achievable goals, and this is the roadmap to get there. And a major part of that is you now have to fix the infrastructure, fix the basic things. And once you start working on those things, you generate employment, you generate energy, you generate alternative to criminal activity. Because I don't think anybody wants to take up a gun with the fact that they could die tomorrow. and just go there.
I mean, the sad reality though is, as much as we hope that is not the case, in some communities the value systems are so skewed that there will be some individuals where from a young age that's their norm, and they will seek to do that because they can't see beyond it.
So what have we done to change the value system? So you got it.
Well, let me just ask you to stick a pin there. We have to pause. We have to take a break. I'll just say this. I have something to say to back up what you said with regards to giving people an opportunity for education. But we'll get into that when we return. We have to take a break, but we'll be back soon on Talking Point on WASN, your content capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. Only on your content capital, WESN.
Welcome back, folks, to Talking Point. Of course, I have some very important guests with me. And when we last left off, one of the last comments that was made was about education, or rather how we might be underestimating the mental or the people, the professional capital that we have in this country, the intellectual capital. That's probably the best way to say it. I'll just give a quick 2 cents about that. I once heard a story about a boy, as an experiment, was transferred out of a junior sec and put into one of the best schools in his area. And the boy performed just as well, if not better, than the people around him in his new school. It just goes to show you that I think the questions that some concerned citizens have about the way we conduct things with ESCA, at the very least, we should have that discussion. But there's more to it than just that, gentlemen, as we now speak with regards to development. There's a lot of different avenues that we could have this conversation. During the break, we were going down one avenue, and I had to interrupt you, Mr. Alvarez. But we were just talking about the fact that we didn't use our revenue, our windfall, to properly fuel our development.
Well, let me give you an example of how infrastructure changes a country. In the United States, after the Great Depression, there was a feeling of apathy and where do we go? And what the government did is that they immediately invested in the interstate highways. And they made transportation one of the key components to open up the country. And once you opened up the country, you opened up economic activity. Infrastructure is a major, major part of the development in any country. When we travel abroad, one of the things we do is that we look around and say, wow, look at those bridges, look at the roads, look at this and that. And in Trinidad, for some reason which is totally beyond my understanding, we allowed our Red House to fall apart. The ceiling and the thing came down and all that stuff. That was the level to which, this is your parliament. The Prime Minister's residence and the Prime Minister's, they actually had to build a new Prime Minister's residence. The Prime Minister's office, which is Whitehall, was falling apart. The roof of the President's house fell in. That's how we treated our infrastructure. One of my most sensitive area for me is water distribution. We have in Trinidad over 25 huge elevated reservoirs. There's the 2 tanks in Laventil that everybody see, but there are places all over Port of Spain and Arima and even in the Southland, where these tanks in Mount Hope, for example, is a huge tank that was built within the last, say, 30 years. And the whole purpose of all of these tanks was we were complying with international best practices, which is you pump the water to the higher elevation and you let gravity flow. Yes. And by letting gravity flow through your system, you don't have this sort of pressure that busts up the pipe and mash up the road and break up people's houses and so on. That's just a common thing. In places in the US where it's flat, they have water towers. Yes. So you have a situation where in Trinidad, we had that structure in place. And it annoys me every time I see these ministers come to say, we have a next booster pump, and a next booster pump, and we open a booster pump. And because when you start turning on those booster pumps, they bust up people's pipes and all that kind of stuff.
Is it the case? Because to me it seems as though they're looking at the shiny technology, booster pump. Well, gravity and tower, that's all for, do we have this? Because I do find myself wondering every time any minister speaks about any technical subject, they're just saying buzzwords. They don't really know what it is. Is it that our politicians are out of touch with even practical reality?
Our politicians don't believe in maintenance because you don't cut a ribbon when you maintain a thing. So what you need is to buy something new, and that gives you two issues. You can tell the public, we just bought a new pumping station, whatever it is. Nice, shiny, bright new thing, and I can go cut a ribbon and say, we've ended all your problems. Because the pump itself is not going to be maintained for its lifespan in a couple of years.
Of course.
But more than that, from a procurement perspective, that is the opportunity for kickbacks. So why I don't get kickbacks out of maintenance, but every time I buy something new, then there's the opportunity. So keep buying something new.
It's so sad though, because in the community where I live in Blue Range, they turn on the water 3 times a week. But for the people at the higher elevation, they get water. They have to put so much pressure on that the people at the lower elevation they always have busted pipes. They always have the road, the St. Lucian Road, which is where the water comes there. There's always a busted main on St. Lucian Road. Now, all you had to do is have that one main in St. Lucian Road, pump water to a tank at the top of Blue Range, because Blue Range has a nice hill there, and then everybody will get water through gravity.
Yeah.
And I said to people, New York City, which has all these huge buildings and tall buildings and so on, they don't use pumps.
Yep.
Because the water comes from upstate, I think in the Catskills or somewhere up there, but it comes from the mountains. So the high elevation that it comes from is higher than the tallest skyscraper in New York. So just gravity just goes straight down to New York.
And then they also have water towers on their buildings.
And what they do, and when we build, because as I tell people, I spent 8 years building buildings in New York. One of the first things you do when you build a building is that when you finish, is that you put a huge reservoir tank at the top of the building. And the water just comes down to feed the floors. So we don't do that. What we do in Trinidad, because I've built buildings here as well, we have the tanks on the ground.
Yep.
And we have pumps. So we pump water to
We don't believe in simple solutions.
I'm telling you.
And I could tell you from experience, yes, even your own small pump, it will degrade your pipes. I won't say more of how I know that, but I know that firsthand.
But the thing about it is that in your home, and I say this to people all the time, in your home, your pump has an automatic float switch.
Yes.
And it has an automatic pressure switch. So that when the tank gets full, it cuts off, that's the float switch, turns it off, and then your pressure gets up to 40 psi, that switch goes off. When you're pumping water from these booster stations, you don't have any automatic switch. So in the night when everybody's tanks is filled, it's still pumping water at full blast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have
into the road.
Yes, and that's why you have these top cocks that these guys go around and turn off the water because they. By the time that happens, it busts up the pipe in the road and all that.
That's why we have so much leaks all over.
So we're about to spend all these hundreds of millions in WASA when I'm not saying they don't need a lot of reorganization, but there are some simple solutions that these water towers that you could build in various places. We have hills around where you could be putting up your
and
storage
the thing about
tanks.
it is that our system was structured that way. And now let me tell you a little bit again. I know we have a long way to go, but let me tell you a little bit again of the infrastructure that we allowed to destroy. At the Hollis Reservoir, during the dry season, when there's no water, the British people put in place a system where water, they have a lot of springs on the Northern Range, a lot of springs. So what they did is that they tapped into all of these springs in the mountains, and they have valves, so they just turn those valves on in the dry season, and it continually replenishes the Hollis Reservoir. That is a system we inherited. I just happened to do a hike through that whole area and saw all the pipe and all the valves. The first hike, which was about 20, 30 years ago, it was still operational. Now, all the pipes are abandoned. So there's no way you can replenish the Hollis Reservoir now during the dry season.
There's also a flip side to relying on booster stations. Because all I'll say is in Tobago, Sandy Point is at the end of the line.
Yeah.
And the flip side is, yeah, by the station you might have pressure, but as you said about people on the hill, even on the flats, when you're at the end of a line, you literally get a trickle. And what happens is everybody else has to get water before it gets to your area. So for some people who are at the end of the line now, this also is not working for them because the water pressure can't equalize throughout the entire network.
And I don't think it's nothing scientific to understand. There's a thing called atmospheric pressure, and it's equal throughout. So once you have water coming from a higher elevation, that atmospheric pressure equalizes the pressure in your pipe throughout the system.
Beyond that, the ripple effect, if you want to say, of all of this, is that we get bad roads.
Yes,
I mean, isn't it? We always say, when you see a new piece of pitch go down, bet your life WASA have to come after because all the pipes.
But Mr. Hammersmith, Keaton made the point, not only does that happen, but they have instances where out of frustration for how long it takes, leaks are patched over after 2 weeks of leaving the leak. And then, as soon as it's patched over, it's still leaking underground. WASA comes and dig up the patch and leaves it unpaved after they fix the leak.
Potential for a sinkhole.
I like the idea you talk about the length. 2 weeks ago, I wrote about a leak in Hyderabad Street in St. James. That this leak was just pumping water and it's damaging the sidewalk. Now, that was 2 weeks ago. Up to now, it has spread to actually damaging the road and the sidewalk. And all WASA did, they came, I don't know, I believe it was WASA, somebody came and put a red arrow. And they painted a red arrow.
This is where the problem is.
Yeah? Never heard that before. Like, that's a new one.
They painted a red arrow with spray paint to say this is, and right now, the walls, the people's private property, the walls are on the verge of falling because there's so much water just pressure every day.
And that must be repeated right through the country.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it the case where, because I think people might not realize, we're not just talking about maintaining what we have, but when damage is allowed in this instance, and not just repeated, there might be instances where the situation is more severe and more critical that we don't necessarily know about. Or situations like the highway that collapsed, where it can't, the lack of engineering can't deal with any sort of these extra stresses. Doesn't that just cost us more in the long run? But and not by a little bit, by a lot.
I don't think that they've cared about infrastructure, because if you have to develop your country, one of the take for example Mayaro. Mayaro is not only an area that's open up for tourism and so on, but for agriculture and for the oil industry.
Yes.
But for years, we have to drive through 2 lanes of a 2-lane road through the coconut field for miles. Now this is such an easy thing that you could get a 4-lane highway to Mayaro that would reduce the traffic.
Wouldn't it be easier to do it now before people build next to the road?
It's so much easier, and then you would reduce the reliance on the Sir Solomon Hochul Highway because people can go to Rio Claro and they can get by just going via that route. But we have to sit down and plan the infrastructure for our country. Plan how does it affect agriculture. Plan where the next development area is going to be, the next industrial estate and so on. There's absolutely no vision and no plan. Yes. So we talk about the infrastructure regarding water distribution. That is a disaster. There's absolutely no vision, no idea, no planning. And again, I always like to talk to you young men, because you don't know what we inherited.
Yes.
Right? I grew up in Moruga. In Moruga, the water in Trinidad and Tobago was distributed by a company called the CWDA, Central Water Distribution Authority. In every village, every township in Trinidad and Tobago, there was a branch of the CWDA. And that branch had 3 sets of people. It had one, which in those days, in our days, they call them the water police. These guys used to walk around some cock hats to make sure you're not wasting water. There was a group of people who every day their duty was simply to drive around and make sure that if there are any leaks in this community, that has been repaired immediately. So I knew every morning I would see the CWDA red truck with about 10 men sitting in the back, driving through the whole community from Marak all the way to Kachip, making sure that there's never a leak. So in my youth, there was never a leaking pipe in Moruga. And those are things we inherited, and that was throughout Trinidad and Tobago. But now, my leak in Hyderabad Street, I have to call St. Joseph. And St. Joseph will put you on some roster that has now mashing up the sidewalk for over 2 weeks. Because there's no structure. We've destroyed the structure we inherited regarding infrastructure and maintenance.
So we've centralized everything. So in fact, local government should really be looking after the local area because they know what's going around in the area.
Now, in theory, Mr. Hammersmith, we are going to supposedly see local government reform with executive bodies based on the THM, well, many years now. So, I mean, hey, they're trying to get a win. And if they manage it, I wouldn't necessarily say on the surface it's a bad idea. But it does seem to go against that whole centralizing everything. Would you say that we have centralized way too much? Because even now how our politics operate, it's central to the political leader of all parties. Even to some extent, the political leader of the PDP tried to do that, and his situation was unique, so it didn't work quite as well. But it seems as though that is the MO of our existing political structure. They want central control. They don't want people to have their own control. Which is one of the reasons why I kind of doubt that, this new executive local government, to what extent are they really going to have the authority?
You just hit on something that I did not even think about, but is really unique. One of the failures of the PDP in terms of the central thing was because the Tobago House of Assembly has a localized, well-structured local government structure.
That doesn't recognize
so the person, the leader, It's not as important.
It also, by constitution, it doesn't recognize the political leader or the party.
Yeah.
It just recognizes who they vote for in the
in the
THA.
THA.
Come back to the question of the whole system. We have a winner-take-all system, devil take the hindmost. And if you centralize everything, that means that half your country at any one time are against the government. If in fact we had monies within the local government, then of course that also means at least half the local and money is fairly distributed. Then you'd get even development as opposed to central government saying, well, I'm only doing this because this is to my political advantage. Well, and you've skewered the system.
Well, I'm sorry to ask you such a big question and then have to say that we have to go to break, folks. When we return, we'll continue on that note as well as continue with the talk about development, because there's more aspects to development and infrastructure. I think road networks, you've hit up on it twice. That's something I definitely want to come back to. But we'll get to that when we come back on Talking Point on WSN, your content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
You have to remember, Jerome. What? It's just the other day I had a bypass surgery.
That I mean you had to bypass me?
You don't know the position I in?
Position? When that was? You know how long me see you in a position?
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the mega laugh festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and of course I'm here with my guest Timothy Hamel-Smith and Mr. Steve Alvarez, talking about infrastructure development, talking about in a general sense, the way this country is headed, of course, former president of the Senate, former political leader of the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago, these gentlemen have been involved, and of course they are also professionals in both construction and in law. So we're not talking about just political bigwigs who don't necessarily have their hand in the practical realities of the world. But folks, we were leaving off again on our topic about infrastructure. I'm not too sure if there was anything left to say, because I did mention I wanted to move on to some wider areas.
Let me wind up infrastructure by showing you how poor infrastructure can lead to the disincentive for businesses to do anything.
This is important.
There's a group of local businessmen that spent something like $1.5 billion to build what is, without doubt, one of the best water parks in the Caribbean. The Five Islands Water Park is on par with any water park anywhere in the world. The best structures in place. But to get to the Five Island Water Park, you have to get through one road that goes from Port of Spain to Carenage. And that one road in the afternoon, or depending on the time of the day, could easily cost you 2 hours of traffic. Now, there are 2 routes to Carenage that you can have. One, you can go through the north coast to come through Macarip, and that way you could have a road on land. The other one, which was presented in the budget of the previous administration at least 3 times, big budget speech from at that time it was the UNC, and they were talking about a causeway to Chaguaramas. And it was budgeted. And there's never a drawing, there's never a plan, there's never a structure, there's nothing. So it's just old talk. But they knew, the politicians of Trinidad and Tobago know that you need another roadway to Chaguaramas, because that's where your coast guards and your army and everything is.
What are the potential for using the existing road to Chaguaramas, but building over it? So you build
which might make more sense than putting any water. Well, because water has
I don't know what the
technicalities.
The financing of it is, but
there are many alternatives. When you look at one of the problems that you have in that same western area is that you have some prominent business people who don't want their houses and their access to the yacht and so on. But it's not very difficult to do a causeway, because it's not as expensive as people think it is, because building things in the sea is, long ago it used to be an issue. But now, because of the type of concrete and the kind of stuff that you have, you can easily do that.
This is shallower, calmer water.
Yeah, and this is right there. You're not going out to sea.
Some of the areas are quite shallow, out there.
But you're not going out to sea. There was a causeway that was built in China. At the same time, and this is the next thing that we have to understand, that causeway in China started at the same time as the highway to Point Fortin. Same time. It was completed within 5 years. And the cost of that causeway, which has turned out to be one of the longest causeway in the world, the cost of that causeway was the same price of the highway to Sugar.
I went to a thing back in the 80s where they actually had a video of the causeway. They had created that's real technology for back in the 80s.
But the cost of it
showed
is
you
the same as the
video
cost,
potential.
as the cost of
and
the highway
they
to
would
Point
create
Fortin.
islands as well, barrier islands out there. So that allowed you to set off some of the costs, because you had land area that you could
now. It was 20-something miles long. We're talking about a causeway from say the foreshore,
correct,
to there, which is like at most 10 miles. So it's not very difficult to do, and it's exciting to do.
And I think part of it too is people might say, well, oh gosh, what does that mean to me? Right? But it speaks to a wider problem. Before I get into that wider problem though, with regards to road development, because I know in Jamaica, they did a highway project, they put tolls on their roads. So if we're worried about financing this causeway, and we're doing it for economic activity, now I don't assume the tolls are going to be large, all things considered, but it's to a luxury destination. It's not like we're doing this so people have access to food distribution, right? Do you think TNT would accept that in order to get certain road projects?
It's beyond that. It's an investment. Chaguaramas has the potential to be one of the most eco-friendly visiting places in the world. I mean, I'm not saying to the world, let me tell you something. I personally don't know of any underground cave that can compare to Gaspery Cave. Gaspery Cave is not only a cave where you see stalactites and stalagmites, you know. It's a cave that has its own pool, a beautiful pool of water as well. Yeah. So this is a beautiful place that the majority of people in Trinidad, not even talking about in the wider world, have never seen. The only time they might have seen is when Marshall Montano did a video in that area, and people were like, wow, that's in Trinidad? That's the Gaspery Cave.
And that's just one part of the area. Yeah. There's a lot for tourism just in that area alone that we've kind of locked out. But I think now that the implications go further with regards to the fact that to go west of Port of Spain, you have limited roadways. To go east of Port of Spain, you have 2 limited roadways that literally, when people think about it, it's the bane of your traffic existence to get to work in the morning if you're working in Port of Spain and living outside of Port of Spain.
What about climate change? If in fact you in that causeway, you created barrier islands as well, you might be protecting your causeway from rising sea level. Listen, all of that, I mean, there are multiple benefits.
When you don't have vision, it's a hell of a thing. When I drive down to Chaguaramas sometimes on a Sunday morning, there are families right along that roadway, they're fishing. You know what people in other places in the world do? They create fishing piers, and they have a whole set of subsequent industries. People selling fishing rods, people selling bait, people selling all kinds of different things. You know. So we don't have to be. As a country, we don't have to be always going to the government for a handout and a hamper and so on. If you do your infrastructure properly, right away, you're going to have somebody selling bacon sharks, somebody selling this, somebody doing that, and it's an income for them, but it also encourages tourism and so on later on.
But what about the boardwalk that is just disintegrated?
Yeah, and it's just there. To what purpose if people can't access it?
So we're in a mess because there's no vision and our infrastructure. There's no infrastructure plan. I mean, there have been planning, and there's been when my political party started, we did a vision for Trinidad and Tobago, and we had something called the network of roads. I remember the election immediately after that. Every political party came up with a network of roads, a new network of roads. To this day,
but they don't.
To this day, they have not been any network of roads.
I mean, that seems to be an ongoing problem. We get promises, but we don't necessarily, even the people who support, right? So now, I'm not saying that, okay, UNC people need to complain about the government, right, about the PNM government. Okay, fine. But PNM voters, not just party members, you voted your party for a reason, or vice versa, any party. Throughout the administrations, I don't really see party members being able to hold their leadership accountable for not giving campaign promises.
Yeah, because, and again, we also have engineering issues. Again, the international, you don't have to make these things up, and you can take either your phone or your computer or take a book and recognize that the way of building roads now is different from the way we built years ago. So that when
are we stuck in the past?
No, we're way back in the past. 5 years, so you could redo the last 5 years.
Way back in the past.
Cycle.
Well, we're way back in the past because now to build a road anywhere in the developed world, what they do is that because of the kind of technology we have today, they would come through with a concrete truck and do a sub base of concrete.
Yes.
So you do a boom and you're done. You know what? The next step after your concrete truck? Asphalt. You know what we do in Trinidad? We pass for at least 2 or 3 months of vibrating and sand and vibrating to get that, because you must have at least 98% compaction capacity before you can put asphalt on. You can get almost 100% compaction capacity by just putting concrete.
Well, we don't have much time left, but I wanted to get to this point because saw a Senegalese-born, French-educated American businesswoman speak about her thoughts about former colonies, particularly African nations, and why she saw their economies not doing well. And one of the main things her main point was ease of doing business. It came back to, and she was pointing to laws as well, laws and regulations, but we could also maybe talk about just things like infrastructure development as well. Ease of doing business means so much to get the investment, to get the private sector generating jobs. I think that's what we kind of take for granted. The oil and gas gives us the money, but we forget, yeah, it gives us the money, but it doesn't give us the employment. That's why the government is employing people by bloating any and every entity that they could stuff as many people in. Ease of doing business. Is there any hope? Because I'm sure there's a lot of businessmen. Is there any hope on the horizon with regards to, does anybody have a plan to even start with this? Because I don't really hear much. I hear digitization, I hear diversification, but as you say, there's no vision, and there's definitely no follow through.
I am convinced now, after watching the politics for the last 10, 15 years, I am convinced now that there's no desire for development and growth. I think what Trinidad has been lured into is the politicians that want to keep supporters looking towards them for hope, looking towards them for some degree of sustenance. So you want a job? I think there are like over 250 state agencies, some of them that do absolutely nothing, just to create jobs for party supporters and to ensure that most of the population continue to depend on them. But when you started to look at simple things like getting a birth paper and a marriage certificate and a death certificate, I'm talking about people having to travel from way out into Toko and Marak to come to Port of Spain to get a death certificate. You know where you normally get a death certificate when we inherited that? In your village. In every village in Trinidad and Tobago, when in my days there was a little house, somebody in the house, with on the outside of the house used to say, Register of Births and Deaths. So now, you don't have that anymore.
Well, Mr. Hammer-Smith, I mean...
Yeah, so, I mean, to just address that issue, of course, today we're in the world of digitalization. So, in fact, you should be able to stay in Moruga and register your birth just by going online, and therefore you need a Wi-Fi network throughout the country. But ease of doing business, you need to cut down the bureaucracy and the red tape, the unnecessary amounts of it. The truth is that if you had to interface with any of our public services, you find the guy at the counter creating his own rules, mounting us as rules. They're not law, but you try to get it done. So we have tried to tackle it. I remember when Vasant Bharat was the Minister in Trade and Industry, he focused on forming a company, one of the issues he looked at. And you had about, let's say, 25 things that had boxes you had to check in order to form a company. He reduced that down to 7 and then to 3, so that you could start a business, you know, virtually overnight. The truth is, in some of our Caribbean countries, you can do it in 15 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
Yes, that's what we're competing with.
Ease of doing business. All your because one of the things you have to check that your name is not similar to somebody else's name. But that's an AI issue. You just put in the name, it tells you what. And so if you had the focus and the willingness to do it, you could make it happen in terms of converting the question of ease of doing business to make it so much easier. But in fact, the truth is there's an anti-business attitude. And we don't realize, and we were able to have that because of oil and gas. When oil and gas goes, where does the revenue come from other than businesses which flourish? And business can't flourish unless there's ease of doing business. And you can't have jobs.
I think if the government is the main employer, you can't use income tax then to pay for salaries. That math does not math. But folks, we have to break for news on the hour. When we return, of course, we will continue the conversation. Primarily with you, the viewer, we will open up the phone lines. We want to hear what you have to think with regards to the development of the nation. And if there are any interesting lessons of history, like what Mr. Alvarez has shared with us, what have we lost? I'm sure quite a few of you might have some anecdotes to give us. But we break now for news on the hour here on Talking Point on WSN, your content capital.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. WPC dies in vehicular accident. Health Minister gets flu vaccine. 110 new officers join the TTPS fight against crime. And internationally, rare COVID-19 protests in Tibet. Now for the details. A woman police constable has died following a vehicular accident last night. Reports say WPC Susan Duncan Thomas was driving a vehicle when another car crossed the median in the vicinity of the Sir Solomon Hochoy Highway near the Gasparilla flyover and collided with her. Duncan Thomas has worked in the Port of Spain court and process and also at the Mounted Branch, but was last attached to the Maloney Police Station. Health Minister Terence Yalsing received the influenza vaccine during a virtual media conference on Wednesday. The Ministry of Health will be rolling out its influenza vaccination starting on Friday at various health centers and on Monday at mass vaccination sites.
I have been vaccinated for the influenza, not the common cold. I just want to close off by saying every year people say when they get the influenza vaccine, well, I still got the flu. The influenza vaccine is to protect you against the deadly influenza A especially, which causes the pandemics around the world, and also influenza B. It is not protective against the normal garden variety common cold.
The health minister confirmed that 75,000 doses of influenza vaccines arrived in TNT yesterday afternoon. Minister Yalsing said the total cost of the 75,000 influenza vaccines is US $285,000. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service welcomed 110 recruits who trained for the past 10 months in preparation for the organization's continued fight against crime. Batch 2 of 2021, Squads G through N, officially became police officers on Wednesday at a graduation ceremony held at the Gymnasium Police Academy, St. James. Acting Commissioner of Police McDonald Jacob congratulated the graduates, acknowledging the significance of their achievement as they were able to attain success despite the challenges of the pandemic. On to international news now. Footage has emerged showing what appear to be rare, large-scale protests against strict COVID-19 measures in the Tibetan regional capital, Lhasa. Multiple videos on social media show hundreds demonstrating and clashing with police. They are said to be mostly ethnic Han Chinese migrant workers. The city has been under lockdown for nearly 3 months as it battles a wave of infections. Tibet is one of the most tightly guarded regions in China. The protests are said to have taken place on Wednesday afternoon and stretched on till the night. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for watching.
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce. The Mega Laugh Festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Talking Point. So, of course, you've heard us speak for an hour, and I am very certain that we could continue conversation for at least another hour easily. But we don't have the time, and we want, more importantly, to give you, the viewer, the chance to ask us a question or to comment. Say where we're wrong, say where we're stupid, or say where you agree with us. Maybe, like I said, give us an anecdote of what we used to have way back when, that for whatever reason it seems went off the rails and isn't working quite as well as it used to. And as young as I am just old enough to have that sense of loss, Mr. Alvarez. As much as I don't know specifically, I do have that sense of things were just a little bit easier. You know, things were just a little simpler.
I'll tell you how simple things were. I spent last weekend in Moruga. And I remember, I was just walking through the village, and I was saying, in that house was the woman who used to keep the post office clean. In that house was the man who used to make sure the drains were cleared. So in the village, there were people who had a vested interest in not only keeping the village clean, but that was their responsibility. There was a guy that drove around on a bicycle with a gallon of paint, and his thing was to make sure that every road sign that started to deteriorate, that he would repaint the road sign. So, you know, we used to call him Scissors Ears or something like that, because for a nickname. But we knew the people who were responsible for maintaining the country. I am totally heartbroken every time I see that hanging bridge in Blanchisseuse and in Moruga, because they're so well built that even with years of neglect, they're still structurally sound. And all those two bridges need right now, the two bridges in Moruga and Blanchisseuse, all they need now is planks and paint. Nothing else. Planks and paint. And for some reason which I can't understand, in the government's vision for Trinidad and Tobago, they just want to see those last two hanging bridges in Trinidad and Tobago fall into the water.
Now,
I don't understand it.
Is it a case, guys, where we do have to ask that we're relying too much on the government? Because I think you made a comment much earlier where all of these programs kind of causes the population to now become more and more reliant on the government. And now, not only are we unable to help ourselves, but we can't even practice getting our voices heard.
Yeah, we centralized everything.
But the government have designed it that way.
But we voted these governments in, huh?
Yeah,
we, at the end of the day, we are responsible, whether by neglect or by choice, of who's in office.
Well, I think also one of the things that people in Trinidad and Tobago now are looking at is that, listen, yes, we voted these people because they had manifestos. I mean, you look at the manifestos, they had a new network of road, they had a talk about agriculture and all that kind of thing. You look at the manifesto, they say, listen, that's a good promise, and maybe voted. But now we've had the experience of both the opposition in government and we have the present party in government. So we know that experience. So you know, where do you get hope? Where do you sit down and think of my family and my children having a better tomorrow? Where does that come from? And it cannot be, and if you look at what's happening in the politics, there are lots of people who stand up and say, I can fix it. And the next one saying, I had the experience, so I could do this. And the answer to Trinidad and Tobago development cannot come from any one person saying, I can fix it, or I know, or I am this great one. The answer has to come from all of us, in every community, in every village, in every township. All of us have to say, this is our country, this is what I can contribute, and we and government have to allow them the opportunity to do this.
And the resources.
And the resources. And if we do that, if we can afford them the opportunity and the resources, we will have less work to do as government. And I think that's the fear.
Folks, please don't be afraid to interrupt the conversation. Call in, let us know what you have to think. But of course, while we wait for calls, another thing that I thought about in our discussions with regards to where the country is, because I always found it amazing that in other nations, and I get it, it's not apples to apples comparisons, but the way our economy is structured, to be a waiter, to do certain jobs that we see as small money, it's not necessarily that small money in the States. You know, some people pay their rent and live off of these menial jobs that people would be struggling and scrunting if they take down here. But is it because that we have so neglected development and we so skewed the economy with the way how our politics work with handouts, that the balance point of the economy is so unnatural that we can't really now, because, and we now have a call, I was now going to say, because Barbados doesn't have a fuel subsidy, but they figured out their price of gas. But I'll stick a pin on that question. We have a caller from Claxton Bay. Good morning, caller.
Morning, I'm Sean, and morning to the panel there.
Morning, Mr. Fisherman.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something. As a senior citizen, you go to the health center, they can't even open the health center door for a whole hour and a half waiting there, right? They can't open the door. They're calling people, nobody ain't coming to open the door. And you as a citizen, you have to stand up and rain your drizzling, nobody to shelter, nothing. You understand what I'm saying? What's really good on this country? And if you want the place or the run along the place, for instance, the grass is high about 3 feet around the building. They're not even maintaining it. I don't know what really happened with the government, what they're doing to the senior citizens. I just want to highlight that this morning. You can't even get medication when you go. A little metformin and tablet, you can't even get that.
Thank you, Mr. Fisherman.
Right,
I mean, that's another aspect of
just let them cut a ribbon for it.
No, it's because
they'll make a new health center, right?
Again, we go back to what we were talking about. But you know, nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room. Why is it that we know the solutions, we know what the problems are, and we know how to solve them, but why are we not doing it?
We can't, yes.
And nobody wants to talk about the fact that in Trinidad and Tobago, our politics is not based on what the plans are and how well we can do it and how do we achieve these goals and so on. It's about race. It's about who represents me. And I was saying, I wrote an article about this, I think, 2 days ago. And when the new Rishi Sunak became the Prime Minister of England. And I said to people, you can look at Rishi. You can look at, there's a Khan guy who's the mayor of London. There's a black person, I can't remember his name right now, who's the mayor of New York.
Yes.
The Secretary of Defense in the United States is a black person. The ambassador to the United Nations for the United States is a black person. So you're looking at very prominent people of Indian ancestry and African ancestry who are doing exceedingly well internationally. And I said to them, you know why they're doing well? Because they are put there based on merit. Based on if they graduate from this one and graduate from Yale and graduate from so and so, they're brilliant people. Sunak is having the support of all those people in his party because he's a brilliant mind. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have lots and lots of very brilliant people. But they can't get the job because of politics. I volunteered. I wrote the Minister of Public Utilities. And I said, listen, I would work for free if necessary to restructure WASA so that at least the people can get water. I will put all the management things in. I have the experience, I know what ought to be done, and I have the management skills to do it. I have an MBA in management, and I've had over 10 or over 20 something years in construction. I can do this for free. But they never even acknowledge it. Why? Because of your politics. So our best minds are not allowed to do what we need to do in our country.
Okay, we have another caller from Tunapuna. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning to the panel.
Morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
What's to begin with?
Caller? We lost you, and I don't believe we cut her off because we don't even know what she was saying. So we have no. I don't know what happened there. Please call back because you know I do want to hear what you were saying. We have a caller, another caller from Chagonas. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Amazing to hear today's program because these people don't seem to know nothing about government.
Oh Lord, Professor. Oh Lord.
Mr. Alvarez gave the answer in his last statement where he said we all must be involved. But what you didn't point out to him, that I pointed out that there is a method to do it, right? With the annual administrative reports and where these reports can be commented on, that is the real problem. He talked about, not the last statement, because the last one I'm making him in charge of WASA, we'd have been doomed. Because he come up with the idea that all over the world you have reservoir up on hills of water will flow by gravity. We have the same system. The difference is we don't have those high mountains. You have to put the reservoir in a position where they can collect enough water. And that was what was done with all reservoirs.
No, but Professor, he was making a different point.
Professor, you're so wrong about that.
Oh, all right, Professor, continue.
Maybe he said twice.
Let me just make that point. The Hollis Reservoir is in an elevated area. It's in the mountains of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's elevated, and that water for years, it supplied all of central Trinidad and so on with water from the Hollis Reservoir through gravity. So be aware when you're making these comments that you have to be aware what the facts are. In Laventille, around the Queen's Park Savannah and so on all the elevated areas, before the houses went higher than the tanks were at the highest elevation.
Yeah, on Chancellor Hill.
Yes, so on. So when you looked at even Mount Hope, they went through the village of Mount Hope to the highest elevation and they put a tank there. So when you talk about that, our system was structured to use gravity to feed. Why? Because that is the way water is distributed. You just take up, you can't make statements that are unsubstantiated. Go on YouTube, go on thing and say, what is a typical water distribution system? And you will see that.
I think the problem was y'all were technically debating two different points.
I hope I didn't comment that in my 2 minutes.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
sorry about that.
Again, he gone off the point.
No,
I was talking about reservoir.
No, but Professor, I think the thing is y'all are debating two different points. That's
no,
the
we are not
problem.
talking. Anyway, let me...
Go ahead, move on to the next point, Professor.
Let me go on. The problem with water, and he talked about when he was in Moruga, fellas pass along and see where the leaks are. That do not apply today. The major amount of leaks today are on the ground. And the cause for them is that after 40 years, the lifespan of our cast iron pipe. That is why we came up with a plan to replace all those cast iron pipes. And instead of the government using WASA to do it, they make sure they hire a set of contractors at exorbitant prices, and the whole thing went bust, and all the pipes park up all about.
I would just say before you speak, I think again, it's different things. I think yes, there's leaks. There could be more than one reason that we're having leaks.
The leaks alone will come up.
I know, Professor, but based off of direct experience, I know that the explanation from Mr. Alvarez with regards to why some leaks happen due to water pressure is valid. I'm not saying that your point is not valid.
That's a minor thing to what I'm talking about.
No, but I'm not saying your point is not valid either.
Deal with that.
No, I'm saying both points could be true with regards to why we have the leaks, and I don't doubt.
You don't waste my 2 minutes.
Oh, you have another point to make?
No, the real point of the infrastructure is nobody checks the work. You say you used to build roads differently long time. Yes, long time the roads had cambers. The roads had proper drainage.
Yes.
If you look at the roads today, they have all kind of hollows in the middle, even on the highways, right? That is the problem. And you have contracts with nobody check in to see that the work is done properly. Any sensible question?
Professor, I like the point that I want, because one of the points that you make that I totally agree with is the engineering of the roads.
Yeah.
Because the extension, another pet peeve of mine, the Digger Martin Extension Highway, which is a new roadway.
The Crystal Street, you know.
From by KFC there right down to the Wendy Fitzwilliams. That's the latest part. There are two areas on that road where the cars either go into the river or they go into the wall. And what they did is that they eventually thing it so that the cars just go into the wall and into the river. And people say, why do that happen? Why does it happen? Because, and the professor just hit the nail on the head, it's not cambered properly. The engineering was so terrible that your car cannot turn the corner and have the camber. And so on. So yes, I mean, I appreciate what he's saying. I think he missed the point in that, and I'm saying that it's not reservoirs in the elevated areas, it's storage capacity.
That's the thing. It was not about reservoirs, Professor. It was about how do you then get the water, the water pressure up. You could either use gravity or pumps, and the point that Mr. Alvarez is making was pumps are not necessarily...
But I actually worked on a WASA project where we were changing the pipes, and WASA is now using ductile iron and no longer cast iron pipes.
We have the caller, hopefully from Tunapuna, that we lost earlier. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, morning.
Yes, we're here now.
I would like to begin with, number one, we need to have a new constitution with a lot of adjustment. Like, for example, we need constitutional reform, and we need to have proportional representation, which I think will be fair when it comes to the country and the population. Will have a better result, and to change a lot of stuff they have in our constitution to make things very serious, and people must serious and do the right thing, control crime and whatever, and to get the country going, to have the country improve. We have to get serious and apply certain laws to have this country in order. Number two, when it comes to employment, we don't want square peg in round holes, because we will continue to have this problem going on, and we cannot improve. Instead of getting better, it's getting worse. We must employ people who are suitable for the jobs and be responsible, and we must use fair prices to get jobs done. Because wastage of a lot of money in this crisis is not fair, and the population and the taxpayer have to just have the money going down the drain, wasting, and we're not reaching nowhere. And thanks for raising the water issue, the road issue, and everything, medical issue, is everything in a confusing state. We need to be fair. We need fairness, and we need proper training of our workers to deal with the population when they have a problem to face with them. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. We have another caller from Digger Martin. Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Sean and your guest. Thanks. Good morning. I did not hear the show, but I don't think I might be too out of timing. I just think that there's a very important word that people often forget. It begins with C. Not the corruption, which we know, nor COVID or climate change, which have become scapegoats, but cumulative. People act as though everything began yesterday or last week or 10 years ago. That is not true. Everything in this country is systemic and cumulative. And there are many, many things that are cumulatively bad. 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was crime, incest, poor governance, not a single functioning government institution. I was forever hearing my parents saying things like, right hand don't know what the left hand doing, WASA, digging up roads. All of these things, people still have no water. That's happened for so long. The divide kept increasing, but our carnival mentality persisted, the lackadaisical culture. Today, we have 30-year-olds now, gifted, super talented people who are migrating every day. Every day I keep hearing that story because they did their part, but things like the 2020 vision, hello, it's 2022, almost 23, never came to fruition. People are now frustrated and daunted. Bright people who have been willing to contribute, people from think tanks, they've lost enthusiasm. the continued talk about innovation and diversification, I'm going now. Hello, you need to be creative. You need to be creative thinkers in order to have ideas. That's the very first thing which is lacking, and the brilliant people are all leaving. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a last caller from Port of Spain. Good morning, caller.
Good morning to Mr. Alvarez and Mr. Hamel-Smith.
Morning. Good morning.
And good morning to Sean and the team. Gentlemen, I've listened to you for the last hour and a half. And I want to ask you a question. If the greatest of all architects were to smile on you two people and give you control of this country, what are the 5 top things you will address, and in what sequence?
Gentlemen, you can answer that. You can answer that in 3 minutes.
Well, I haven't thought about it, but one of the first things that I would want to do, one of the very first things is to create a structure where the people in the communities can manage themselves again. See, we keep thinking that we have all the answers, and we're so brilliant. But if we put a structure in place where the people in their communities can look after themselves in terms of their infrastructure, in terms of their water distribution and so on, and you empower them. I think Tim was talking about you have to give them the resources to do it. That changes the communities. A strong community is a strong country. And the other thing that you have to look at is that people must feel safe. I don't think I'll get to all 5, but I can tell you that people must feel safe in their community. To have safety in your community, you must have, 1, quick access to justice, so that if you you go to court, and this is something we inherited. I always say to people that in 80-something townships in Trinidad and Tobago, there are 80-something of them, there were 80-something courthouses. So that every Wednesday in Moruga, for example, was court day. Right. So that the magistrate will come down and you listen to your case and so on. There was always quick access. If you want to cuss your neighbor, quick access to justice. Now it takes 10 years and 15 years and so on. And the other thing is structured police patrol. You must have structured police patrol in your communities, because a policeman cannot decide, I'm going to walk down Frederick Street today and not walk down Henry Street tomorrow. It must be structured. You go down this street, you come across that street, you come across the street between this hour and that hour, and that's where there's always a structure and order to the society. But
Mr. Hamel-Smith, any?
Yeah, they're not unconnected. All the issues coming from Tunapuna, from Digger Martin, from Port of Spain. Because, and Steve referred to it, it's because we have to get the fundamental problems corrected. Unless we do that, we're spinning top in mud, and nothing will change. So that you ask the question, how come the parties have these manifestos and we say, hey, those are great things to do and we could look to transform Trinidad and Tobago and whatever, and yet nothing happens at the end of the day. And it is because the political system has become corrupted in the sense of the system.
And centralized.
And centralized. Because what has happened is that because we've now, as Steve indicated, have a system in our politics where the base of 2 parties are all related to race, so tribal affiliation. Once you do that, then if I'm the politician, I don't have any need to perform. All I have to do is to call upon my base to vote for me, and they will come willingly along, and I become, and I don't. So our engagement of our politicians, of whoever becomes our government, has nothing to do with performance. And therefore they don't have to perform, and therefore I don't perform. I might as well get all the opportunities for easy money. And so the other person talked about, really she was talking about merit. Merit isn't rising to the top, but isn't that because we have a system created, devised to achieve where we are? And that's why the earlier question about constitutional reform is so very right, because we will continue to have this spiral downwards if in fact we don't change what is the fundamental problem why the people of Trinidad and Tobago don't demand performance, because we're tribally based, and that's all you have to do in order to become the government.
Well, I'm sorry I have to cut you off, but just to add to that, I think part of it is we're tribally based because to some extent, for various reasons, we like it so. Some people profit from it, and some people just don't want to have to spend the effort to deal with it. But I will support the point about constitutional reform, because I don't understand why MPs, Parliament, legislature are also making up the executive. Exactly. Those are two jobs. Those are two full-time jobs.
By the way, most people think that we cannot change it because everybody thinks we need a 3/5 majority, and you're not getting that again, because we're pretty much evenly divided, half and half.
If we really want positive
what I'm
change.
saying to you is that those issues can be done with a simple majority.
Well, I mean, simple majority.
Not an Al-Rawi majority.
But folks, we're more or less out of time, so I will have to leave that there. All I will say is, on behalf of my co-hosts who unfortunately couldn't make it today, remember, no matter how bad it might seem, today is still a day to have a good day. And I will close by saying it's not about the mustard and the ketchup, but rather, together we aspire, together we achieve. It is in our coat of arms, a simple saying to live by. Folks, I want to thank all of our callers. I want to thank our guests. This is WESN's Talking Point. We will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN